So first of all, I wanted to thank you very much for just coming on and taking the time. Also, it takes a lot of courage to share any type of personal story. So I really, really appreciate that.
Pleasure.
Um, I also wanted to remind anyone who's on this webinar that, none of the other participants can see you or see your name. Confidentiality is super, super important to us. So we just want to make sure everyone is comfortable. And we will be taking questions at the end. Um, so feel free to send me questions if you have any, even during, while Blayne is sharing her story. Um, okay, so egg freezing or fertility preservation. It's a funny thing. We were talking today and I was telling you how to me, it feels like such a hot topic just from the types of, the direct messages we get on Instagram or just the inquiries that come in to our rabbis through our website. It's it's popular, but I feel like there's still so much clout or just people have there's just so much unknown that people want to know about. And it's one thing to discuss it from a medical perspective with the doctor or from the halachic perspective with the rabbi, but to hear someone's story who actually went through the entire process from start to finish, from thinking about egg freezing to, actually booking an appointment with your doctor, discussing it, and then going through it and then having children. It's another type of um, knowledge that you're gaining. So I wanted my first question to you, just to open up, is basically, could you take us, kind of share a little bit about who you are and how you came across Pua and what was your life like, I guess, dating or leading up to that process.
Sure, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. Glad I can share my story, and thank you to everybody who's joined tonight. Like you said, anyone who has any questions, like I'm happy to answer them later. So feel free to chat them on over. Yeah, so my name is Blayne. I currently reside in Woodmere. I lived on the Upper West Side for a very long time. Um, Loved it. A great group there. Um, really enjoyed my time. Started dating in my early 20s when I moved there, and continued dating through my 20s and into my 30s. Searching for the right person, having dates and relationships, and nothing seemed to really be taking. And time was kind of moving. When I was 35, I believe, um, two of my married friends very sensitively mentioned to me, hey, would you like to maybe think about considering egg freezing? Now, this was 2016, I believe, or 2015. And I really didn't know anyone who had done it. People would kind of like not joke about it, but bring it up as like a haha, we're gonna have to freeze our eggs. Not even like a thing that was people were doing.
So
Um,
you had heard about it before, but
I had
it
heard
was
about
never
it,
much.
but I really didn't know people who had done it. Um, Happens to be, I didn't know this at the time, but I think the way that they do egg freezing now wasn't even FDA approved until 2014. So for it to then
Yeah.
trickle into the frum community, you have to add time onto the top of that. And this was 2015. So I really didn't, it certainly wasn't talked about in like real terms. I didn't really know anyone who had done it. And I didn't really want to think about it. Made me feel kind of like stuck in my situation. So I filed it away and then sort of forgot about it. Um, Continued on, dated someone, didn't work out. And then I guess about a year passed and I said, you know what, maybe it kind of kept coming back in my head. So I said, you know what, let me look into it and just like see what it's all about. I didn't even know like is this halachically acceptable? I didn't know anything. Um, so I I did a Google search, and I certainly wasn't going to ask anyone. I wasn't going to go to any seminar. Like it just was too embarrassing for me. So I did a Google search, and I came across an event that the Jewish Center apparently had hosted, which I didn't even know about, had been recorded. And so I said, oh, you know what? I'm in privacy of my own home. Let me listen and just see what this is all about. So at that event was Dr. Klein, who I believe you had on last week from Fertility, and a few social workers. I actually don't remember if there was a pool representative or not on the panel, but I said, okay, well, if the Jewish Center is hosting this, I assume that means it's lawfully acceptable. So that's a good start.
Yeah.
Let me see what they have to say. So I listened to the thing, and it was not easy, emotionally kind of getting past that. But I said, all right, just do what you got to do. And I said, okay, let me Google Dr. Klein. Like, what is this? Like, who's this guy? What is he about? And I saw that his practice extend fertility was specifically geared toward egg freezing. It wasn't just like encompassed in this whole IVF. In my head, that was just like married people. It was just my stage in life. It was just like it was not where I was. So, but this was specifically for egg freezing. I said, okay, maybe they'll understand where I'm coming from. They can kind of shed light on the situation. So I kind of got my courage up and I made a phone call and I said, let me just go in for an information session. And it turns out they had just opened up for like outside of friends and family. I showed up at their office, kind of walking in the streets of Manhattan. They're like looking around, like nobody see me, it's very like covert. And I went in and like beautiful office and everyone was super nice and helpful. And at the time they just opened. So I think people didn't really know about them yet. I was like the only person in the office. I'm like, is this a legit place?
Mm-hmm.
And I had an information session and they gave me what to think about. They walked me through some parts of the process. And I went home and I thought about it and it was very hard. And then I just said, you know what, maybe I should give it a shot. I just, I don't know what's to be, and it's an insurance policy and hopefully I'll do it. And then I'll feel like I did my shtadlis and then hopefully I will never use them.
What
So,
was the hardest part for you? What was you were saying it got you emotional in the, when you were at the presentation? What was it that, oh, you're here, like you actually have to confront this?
yeah, I think it's like, I think, at least for me, and that wasn't really part of the process that I was expecting.
Right.
Kind of expecting like, okay, like I'll, meet my husband and family and it'll be great. I just, the egg freezing part wasn't really part of the equation. So it was kind of like a little bit of a reminder that like I wasn't where I wanted to be in that part of my life. And I think that was hard. So once I kind of wrapped my head around that, and got more facts about the process. I was also a little bit worried about the process, which I guess we could talk about in a bit too. But once I wrapped my head around that, it actually kind of changed. Like it changed my whole perspective. And it took time, but once I got there, it kind of made me feel empowered. I felt like I have this opportunity to do something that could be really big for my future. And that's amazing. Like they didn't have this even a few years ago. They had iterations of it, but just the fact that this is an option is like an incredible thing. And maybe that takes a little pressure off me too, because I'm, what did it say in the flyer? Preserving your future. Like it's true. It's like an opportunity to freeze time, you know? So once I kind of got my head there, I felt pretty good about it because I felt like it was a really good option that, was could be very impactful later on. And again, hoping that I'll never have to think about it again.
And what was your biggest apprehension? Because meaning you went to this presentation, but then when did you make the phone call? Did it take time for you to process or you just
Yeah,
jumped right in?
I'd been thinking about it for a few months before I'd found that. Actually, I had reached out once to another clinic that was like mostly focused on IVF, and they also did egg freezing.
Mhm.
And I'd spoken to someone there briefly, and they, was mostly talking about, couples who are, going through hardships, which obviously is like a whole separate topic and, difficult part of fertility journey. Um, but that, for me was hard too, because it was kind of like, well, I'm not there, so I don't really think they get where I'm at. So then when I went to extend and it was geared specifically towards egg freezing, it kind of, at least emotionally, helped me a little bit get more comfortable around the idea.
Nice. Did you seek any sort of mental health support at the time, or did they? set you up with somebody? Did they,
Uh,
you
so,
didn't,
so as the process went, I did ask to speak with a couple of women who had done it before, especially because, like I said, I really didn't know people who had done it. And so they gave me a couple of numbers of people who had agreed to speak about their experience. My questions, I guess, to them was mostly like medical, like what was it like? What did it feel like when you're going through the process? Um, it's a lot of injections, and I'm really bad with that. So I was very concerned about that. And so I kind of went through the process, over the phone with one or two people. And then I'm a very private person. So as we've talked about, this speaking about this is not my go-to. So I spoke to, like, I talked to my mom about it, and I think one friend, and that was basically it. So, um, yeah. So then I, kind of decided to do it, and then you really need to get the facts, all the facts together, and the finances, of course, and kind of get your head around it, and then make sure you have a block of time where you can, go through the process from a medical perspective.
so can you give us a glimpse into that process? Can you walk us through a little bit? What does it look like from your first appointment to like yeah, just walk us through.
The order of events and the details are a little bit hazy just because it's been a while and I've gone through other processes since, which we could talk about. As you alluded to, I fast forward, story spoiler, I ended up using my eggs. So that process is much more, more clear in my mind. But it's a lot of monitoring in the office. You're in a lot. It's a lot of injections, which most people do administer themselves. I was not able to do that. So I arranged with the head nurse at Extend, Dana, who's wonderful. She's helped me through this entire process. And so she would come and help me do the injections because I just couldn't do it. And then you go and they do the actual retrieval, which is not, it's somewhat invasive, but like you go home, not, it's, there's, kind of like a propofol and there's a procedure, but you go home, in a couple hours. And then,
So, but what's that like the from the time you get the injections, what's the time frame? The injections to the retrieval, what's the time frame on it?
I think it's a couple weeks. I don't remember the exact timing. But it has to be like they are monitoring your body and your cycle based on what they're doing. That's why you have to keep going in for blood monitoring so that they can see that all the hormones they're putting into you actually doing what it needs to inside. Like they're basically priming your body so that they can retrieve as many eggs as possible. Um, so again, like medical side of that's probably a better question for Dr. Klein or somebody like that. But they're basically going to retrieve as many as possible and then check the health of the eggs and then try to freeze as many as possible. Um, one thing that people should know, which they did tell me, but I don't know if I really like either heard it or processed it, is that a lot of them don't make it, and even the ones that do, when when you take them to use them, sometimes they don't survive that process, and then if they do, sometimes they're not, you know, the embryo might not be good. Like there's a lot of different stages um, to it that, nothing's a guarantee. Even once you make the decision to do it, still not a guarantee what's going to happen. So one thing I think I would definitely tell people is that if they decide to do it, they should also try to think about going for more than one retrieval, because you want to store up as many as you can, and you don't know what that's going to yield, and how many are going to actually make it. I think they say like 12 eggs could be 1 to 2 embryos, but again, I'm not a medical person, and that might change from year to year. So just to give you like a little perspective. So
And you did it once. You did it once the other trip.
I went twice. So
You went twice. You said you went twice. Okay.
I did two.
One after the other, or a few years apart.
It was, I want to say 4 months apart.
Okay.
Needed like to give my body a little bit of a rest and my brain a little bit of a rest.
Sure. Sure.
Again, I think I was kind of like the overachiever in me is like, all right, I'm just going to do it once. Like, yeah, I hear what they're saying, and I'm going to be good. And then, you find out, right, like how many you got. And I was like, oh, I'm going to need to come back. So, you just really just depend. Um, yeah.
And at this point, you're single. Are you dating? Did you meet your husband yet? Talk to
I
us.
was single. I wasn't dating anyone at the time. And then, so I froze my eggs, and then I was 37. So time froze at 37 for those eggs. Put them away, paid for cold storage. I think it's somewhere in Boston or something like that. And yeah,
You did this with Pua Hashgacha? You
yeah,
had,
yeah. So that's how I came across Pua. So they had mentioned that Pua does supervision, which again I hadn't really thought about. And so Pua has been wonderful. They send like the sweetest people to come, and they check in on you, and they bracha, and they give you a bracha, and it's really nice. And they are in there in the facility there in the lab, and they just make sure everything is going according to plan, and just nice, to also just have like another check in there. Yep, that's my name. uh, so I think that's been really good too. So that's how I got connected to Pua. And I remember asking at the time the person who coordinates the supervising. I said, "Oh, do you guys have any? Like, I haven't seen anything about webinars or any events or anything for just for women. Like kind of quiet that people can go to." And again, like it wasn't really a thing that people were doing. Like,
right.
really was at least in my circle, seemingly kind of like a new thing that people weren't really talking about. So there's a lot of talk about, groups for IVF and seminars for IVF, which is, obviously extremely important, but the focus on egg freezing, it really was not there. Which, by the way, I think over the next year or two after I did it, I started hearing more of my friends doing it, and it started to be at least like amongst girls quietly. It was starting to get traction in terms of people talking about it. So like anything else, things just take time to kind of. But again, like to your point in the beginning of our conversation, it's still not something that people. It's still kind of taboo. Like it's like a thing. People don't really want to necessarily speak up and say, "Hey, freezing my eggs." Want the whole world.
Right.
So,
Right.
I mean, look, if people do, that's great. For me, that was not something I was comfortable doing. So.
Well, I just feel like now it's so much a part of the conversation, or it has to be because people are getting married much later. I think the statistic that I came across last year was most or 50% of women have their first child after 30. That's just not what it was 30 years ago, or 40, or when our parents were having children.
Definitely.
People were having children in their 20s, and now, with just careers being put, like the focus is more career. There's so many different factors, not just in the film world, but also, just the world at large. So,
100%. And
so
then,
yeah, the
yeah. No, I was just gonna say. So then, just like the fast forward. So then, I actually ended up meeting my husband at 39. I got married when I was 40. And I remember on our third date, my husband I have two stepdaughters who are teenagers, and they're wonderful. And I remember on our third date, I was trying to come up with a good way to say, like, do you want to have, what's the right time to say, do you want to have more kids? Because for me, that was very important. And we were walking from bowling to the subway, and I just blurted out, "Do you want to have more kids?" And he thought it was like the weirdest time. Like it wasn't like over dinner having a serious conversation. It's like, "Oh, hey, what was your bowling score? Do you want to have more kids?" um, and
that's so funny.
and he said, "Yeah, I'd love to have more kids. Like, do you want to have more kids?" I guess he was caught off guard, and I said, "Well, I'm going to start with one, and then we'll go to more." So yeah, so we got married. I was 40,
Mhm.
and then
Did he know, or did you discuss the egg freezing with him?
I told him somewhere along the way. It wasn't in the beginning, but it was somewhere along the way. I brought it up and I told him, and he was like, "Great." Um, and yeah, so then, but again, I don't think we really like had a conversation about needing to use them. It was just like FYI, and this was hard for me, and this was the experience I had. It's like, okay, thank you for telling me. Um, and then we got married, and then time was passing, and you know, wasn't really moving in that area. So decided to kind of look into what was going on, and then time passed, and so after about a year or so, maybe a little less, I set up a call with Dr. Klein, and my husband, obviously, and we said, "Can you talk to us about this is our situation? It's been some time. What do you think?" And yeah, so he talked us through what that means. And again, I figured, all right, getting married at 40, but okay, like a lot of my friends have had babies, after 40. Like I'm not still not gonna eat the eggs, and then lo and behold. um, so we talked to him, and then we tried a few other things, and then eventually we decided this was the path forward for us to have a family, and so got to use my eggs. And talk about that too if you'd like. And now I have two daughters, both from my frozen eggs when I was 37.
Unbelievable.
I had my daughter three at 42. And I had my daughter who's almost 11 months right before Purim last year. So the week of Purim. So, freezing my eggs turned out to be my family. So thank God.
Unbelievable.
Make decisions what the path's going to be, you do your shtadlis. Hashem has whatever plan he's going to have for you. Do the best you can. And, in the end, we ended up using them. So
I know that with your last child, the pregnancy overlapped with some events that were happening. Yeah.
Yeah. So, coming, obviously, anytime there's a baby brought into the world, it's a huge bracha and a huge, it's an amazing celebration. When I had my first child, especially given, my journey and the difficulties we had first with deciding to freeze my eggs and then having to use them. And, that also, by the way, is not like a simple guarantee. Just because you have eggs doesn't mean it becomes an embryo. It doesn't mean it, it takes, doesn't mean it, there's like a lot of different stages. So it was just like such a huge thing for my husband and I. And so my 3-year-old is named Eliana because Hashem answered us, and we really were davening pretty hard for that. And then I became pregnant with my second, also through my frozen eggs, and I was pregnant on October 7th. So for me, obviously everyone had just getting through the day and through those months, for all the Jewish people, it's obviously like very, very trying. For me, just hearing the stories about these families and everything, it was just, it was really unbearable. I had trouble playing with my 3-year-old for those first couple of weeks, just thinking of all these poor families. It was just very, very difficult. I felt like my husband went on a mission about a month after, and
after she was born, I'm saying.
October 7th. And I was pregnant, so I wasn't going on a mission, and I felt a little bit helpless. We were doing like everyone else, obviously, donating where we could, sending duffel bags, wherever we could participate in. But for me, it kind of felt like carrying a Jewish neshama just had even more importance than before, because it was helping to really almost like doing a part of rebuilding the Jewish people. And so when my daughter Michal was born, there was that extra level of importance and achdus and all these things. We named her Michal after my great aunt, and then her middle name is Elisheva after Rose Lubin, whose name was Elisheva, who was a lone soldier police officer who was killed a few weeks after 7. And my husband, when he was on the mission, he went to pay a shiva call to the family. We didn't know them, and he really connected with them. And so we really wanted to pick a name that was, relevant to someone who's really going to be fighting for the Jewish people. And so we've been in touch with her parents, and we've sent pictures and whatnot. And so she's Michal Elisheva. And along that path, as kind of had those thoughts going through my head through the rest of my pregnancy, I was like, what else could I be doing here? I just feel like especially now at this time, we all need to be doing something. And so, as difficult as it is for me to share my story, I thought if I can help someone else who's maybe struggling or feeling isolated and doesn't have someone to talk to or has questions and doesn't know, like, doesn't feel like there's a public, they don't feel comfortable going into like a public space to ask those questions. If I could be a resource and help other people bring Jewish neshamas into the world, then I want to be able to do that. So it brings us here.
Really, really special. It was, I remember you telling me this a while back when we first spoke, and it made me very, very emotional. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that so much. Okay. So before we take questions, I just wanted to sort of end off with, if there were three things that you could tell a woman who's on the fence about this process to encourage her or make her less afraid. I mean, I think you've already done a good job through the talk, but if there's any three specific things that you would add to what you've already shared,
Sure.
what would that be?
I guess the first thing I would say is you're not alone. Um, there are a lot of people who are either also, you know, thinking about it and don't know who to talk to. And also plenty of people who you can talk to. But just know you're not alone. Any questions or fears you have are totally normal and justified and make sense. I'll definitely say that. I would say you should feel like, you know, you're doing an amazing thing, even thinking about it, if it's something that you think is right for you at your place in life. And it's an insurance policy, and take some pressure off you because you have this insurance policy. And like I said, I think once I came around to that, I felt like that empowered feeling. So yeah, and the process is not that bad. um, it's not great, but it's fine. And I think if you can, kind of find a support group while you're going through it, I think that's helpful too.
And PUA could definitely help with that. I just want to really highlight that. We have a PUA cares team with mental health professionals. We have medical and halachic guidance, top-notch, excellent referrals and connections with doctors that we really trust, because you definitely do not want to just choose any doctor, even if they have 5-star Google reviews. We've heard nightmare stories of people who have come to us after they've just Googled a doctor and it was no good. And our rabbanim there's no words for our rabbanim. They're not just rabbis that, okay, here, next. They're truly caring. They're tremendous Talmidei Chachamim, and they have really thorough medical knowledge as well. So I must say that.
Just a plug for PUA, by the way. PUA is amazing, and the people who work for PUA are incredible. There was one time that we were so mentally in the weeds about my embryo transfer that I forgot to reach out to PUA to schedule the supervision. And I was in the car with my husband on the way to the office to do the retrieval. And I don't know, him or me, one of us realized oh my gosh, we didn't organize PUA. So I texted her and I was like, my retrieval's in my transfer is in an hour. Totally forgot. I'm so sorry. So she called somebody in the city and they jetted down to the office and they were there.
This was Rifki. Do you remember who it was? Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Wow. In the nick of time.
She's like, don't worry, we got it.
Amazing. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna share some questions.
And yeah, you can definitely share my contact information at the end if anyone
Yes.
wants to. I'm happy to
Yeah.
talk.
Same. I'll put it up here in the chat. So can you share more about your experience at Extend Fertility? I'm thinking of working with Dr. Klein and would love more insights into his office. By the way, for the person asking this, we just had a webinar with Dr. Klein, and it's on our YouTube channel. Feel free to look at that.
Sure. So I love their practice. Dr. Klein and all his team, they're really great. I felt like, even emotionally, they've been very, very helpful. Like I said, I was kind of one of the first people in the door. So, I was able to connect with them, and then kind of carrying through my babies. So, it's been like a long relationship with them. And they've really been super helpful and answering all my questions and kind of hand holding. So I would, been very, very, happy with my experience there. All the doctors. And as I mentioned, Dana, who I believe she's a COO now. She's also a nurse. She really has helped guide me through the process. So for me at least, that was very important. Obviously to have, top-notch medical care, and they all do. I mean, you can Google the doctors there. They all come from other, clinics and whatnot. And but for me, that was also having that personal touch, which was very helpful because, it's not just a medical journey. So
Right.
yeah, so I would definitely recommend them.
Fabulous. Did you have any anxieties, both medical and financial, around the process?
Yeah, sure. I mean, medical, like I said, I'm really bad with injections. So I was very worried about that. Um, there's no way I was going to be able to administer it myself. So I was definitely nervous about that. And like I said, in retrospect, it wasn't that bad. But I, still can't give myself an injection. So, but I do think, that service, I think people do provide that service to kind of help you with the injections. I know Extend does, so I imagine other clinics do, but Extend definitely offers that if somebody needs. So I was definitely hesitant about that. I also, obviously didn't know what it was like the first time, so I was worried about that, which is why I wanted to speak to people who had done it. Um, and yeah, I mean, look, financially, none of these procedures are cheap. I don't know what the status is now. I know some insurance companies or some companies do, um, or at least are starting to cover some of the costs. Um, so, I would definitely look into that, as somebody is thinking about, whether or not they're doing it. You can also speak to, I know like Extend, I'm sure they have information on this. Other clinics might as well, kind of guide you through the process based on your insurance, or definitely check if you work for a large company, they might offer something now. I think that's becoming somewhat more common too, with some of the larger companies. So that would definitely be a huge help. Um, and even if the procedure is not covered, the medication might be covered. Like there's other, different ways that you can kind of, trim some of the costs. Again, like when I did it, it was froze my egg 8 years ago, so it wasn't really a thing that insurance companies were really thinking about it. Actually, maybe like Facebook was. I don't know. Maybe one company was, but other than that, I wasn't really. I don't think it was a thing. But now I think it's kind of like a more accepted thing that could be potentially covered. So I would definitely look into that.
Okay. We also offer financial assistance. You're welcome to reach out to us as well. Again, I'll put my contact info to them.
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, like PUA is, you know, you guys have all been through this with so many people. So anyone has any of these questions should also, reach out to you, or I'm sure you have other people at PUA who, can kind of talk to them about the different facets of it because you kind of know all this information. So I would definitely recommend that to anyone considering it too.
Okay, what was your experience post-procedure? I.e., nausea, weight gain, headache? How long did it take to recover? I
Um,
understand women take off, she's saying women take off from work the day of, the next day.
right. So leading into it, feel kind of yucky. Able to go to work, but like bloated, you know, it's just like you kind of feel, even if you don't look it, you just like feel like you kind of look bloated and yucky, at least for me. Um, that was like, I would say mostly how I felt leading into it. The day of, definitely taking the day off. Um, and then the next day, did I go to work? Maybe I worked from home. And then after that, I was basically fine. So again, like it's not like a major, it's not like a procedure per se. So, but like, you're getting, you know, sedated in some aspects and they're, doing something somewhat invasive. So it's not like you're, just having blood work and going home. But, it's like definitely like a manageable thing. And, after a day or two, basically back, getting back to yourself.
I'm gonna ask you two more questions. How did you feel when taking the injections?
Um, so there are like different tricks, I think, that could or could not work. Icing the area, keeping the medication cold, which again, like your clinic or, your doctor can kind of give you some tips on that. It was not fun, but manageable. It's like, you know, yeah, I'd say exactly that. It's not fun, but manageable. It was okay. Like again, I wasn't doing it to myself. So I think if I had to do that myself, it would have just been like made the whole process harder. Physically, it was like, for like the 10 seconds that you're doing it or the 30 seconds afterwards, it's uncomfortable. And then, you ice the area or whatever it is that works for you. And then you're basically fine. It's basically like for me at least, and look, everyone's different. Everyone's bodies react differently to different things. At least for me, it was more like as it was kind of building up and doing what it was supposed to be doing with my body, then it was kind of became a bit more and more uncomfortable. So the injections themselves weren't, once you kind of got in the pattern, it wasn't really like that big of a deal. It was more like as it was building, kind of just feeling a bit uncomfortable. That's what I would say. I don't have pain. It was just uncomfortable, like discomfort. But like I went to work, I went out with friends, um, during the process. Not again, not the day of, but maybe like not the day before, 2 days before. But through the process, yeah, I was kind of doing my thing. So it wasn't like stopping me from living life. It just like internally, it was kind of feeling uncomfortable.
Okay, and
Not
last
like
question.
2 weeks, it's not like that where you're like in bed for 2 weeks. Definitely not.
Right, right. It's not a surgery. It's not.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question. Can you speak to one to three things you know about the process now post-procedure that you didn't know before?
Um, the one thing I think I mentioned earlier is uh, plan to think about if you're able to doing it more than once. Like mentally, financially, if you're able to try to think that through, just so that you can freeze as many eggs as you're able to. If you can only do it once, that's if you only need to do it once, that's great. But I would just mentally prepare yourself because if you kind of go for the first one and it doesn't yield a great number, you don't want to have to go through that whole emotional process again of obviously be disappointed. But if you prepare yourself, I think it's a little easier to take, which I didn't do. So I would recommend that. What else? That I didn't know before that I know now. That the process medically was not so bad. I think I was really worried about those injections. Again, that's me. Some people don't get freaked out by that stuff.
No.
So for me, that was the thing. And yeah, that's all I can think of right now.
Thank you so much. So if you're comfortable to put your contact information in the chat for others,
Sure.
that
And I
would
just
be
want to say,
awesome.
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so people
Yeah,
could message you with questions.
there. And I was just going to say, like, even joining this webinar and thinking about it for anyone. I mean, I haven't looked, so I don't really know who's on the call, but anyone who's on the call, like, you should already feel really good about yourselves that you're doing something to think about it, whatever you decide for your own path, But the fact that you're reaching out and thinking about things, um, you know, potentially for your future is a big deal. So you should feel good about that.
Thank you. Thank you for the encouraging words. We're getting a lot of positive feedback
Great.
just in the chat. So thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so Blayne is gonna put her contact info there. There it is. For anyone who wants to reach out, please feel free. Do not be shy. And thank you all for being here tonight. Have
Thank
a
you
wonderful rest of your night.
so much.